In 2012, Ford introduced a new 3-cylinder turbocharged 1.0 EcoBoost engine that literally changed the game. Its design has since been copied by other companies, so many of the problems are similar. 3-cylinder engines with 101, 125, and in later years 140 horsepower became a record in terms of power density for segment B and C, to whom they were actually intended. At that time, only sports car engines had greater power density. Torque was also very high for its time, reaching 170 Nm in most versions. On powerful versions, the so-called overboost was available, up to 210 Nm for 30s. The unit, named Fox, gradually replaced the naturally aspirated engines of the Sigma series with a volume of 1.25 to 1.6 liters. Ford was so bold that the 1-liter turbo engine appeared even where larger Duratec units of 1.8 to 2.3 liters, developed jointly with Mazda, had previously been used. The new 3-cylinder was assembled in Cologne, Germany, Craiova, Romania, and Chongqing, China. Design features. The high power density was achieved thanks to improvements in the areas of supercharging, injection, pistons and engine management program. A more square configuration equal bore to stroke is more suitable for maximizing efficiency, since more of the heat generated by combustion of the mixture is converted into mechanical work. In terms of actual performance, the bore-to-stroke ratio of 71.9 by 82.0 mm is a negative factor because the cylinder bore is smaller than the stroke. This means small valves and higher pumping losses. In addition, the piston must travel a greater distance per engine revolution, which entails a greater average piston displacement, greater acceleration, greater kinematic losses and greater load on the mechanisms. Be that as it may, the design of long-stroke supercharged 3-cylinder engines with very high specific power was copied by almost everyone in subsequent years. I have good news for you. Now, if you are planning to buy a used car, or learn more about your car, you no longer need to search for the information you need on the internet. We have collected everything in one place for you, on the website carme.pro. Here you can find out everything about the car, what breaks and at what mileage, any problems with engines, chassis or gearboxes, which trim levels are better not to mess with and how not to lose money buying a used car. You will learn all this on carme.pro. Ford chose a cast iron block. It is heavier, but since the specific heat of steel is much less than that of aluminum, the block heated up surprisingly quickly. Here the competition was not so typical. For example, the 1.0 TSI engine from VW is aluminum. Balancing. If the 3-cylinder engine in cars of the lower price segment can still be balanced by a counterweight on the crankshaft, then with an increase in displacement and installation in more expensive cars, it requires a more efficient solution. Up to this point, a balancer shaft was used. However, its drive, bearings and inertia create noise as well as resistance. All of this takes away a significant portion of the savings that the 3-cylinder engine concept provides. Ford engineers were the first to use a deliberately unbalanced flywheel on one side and an unbalanced pulley on the other. The result is impressively quiet operation without additional rotating masses or gears. This solution was copied by everyone. Ford managed to choose the design very well, so that the engine itself will definitely not fall apart. If mechanical breakdowns occur, it is a consequence of certain nuances. For example, clogging of the oil pump suction basket with timing belt wear products. The most controversial innovation was the timing belt drive gears, which were immersed in oil to reduce noise and friction. Ford first used this design on the upgraded version of the 1.8 TDCi Kent engine in 2008. In the original design, a chain in the oil tank went from the crankshaft to the injection pump, and then a dry belt from the pump to the camshaft. Since the chain was noisy, it was replaced with a belt without any additional design changes. For a diesel engine, this solution seemed very good in the early years. At least as long as the belt replacement regulations were followed, after 150,000 kilometers. However, this solution is known for numerous problems that manifested themselves many years later. And this happened if the timing belts were not changed on time. Perhaps because the sellers were exaggerating the mileage, and the car owners did not know the true mileage. Or because some people liked to use cheap oil. Ford, with wet belts, prescribes its own performance standards that do not cause premature belt wear. In the case of the 1.8 TDCi, this is Ford WSS M2C913D. So, Ford, for a high-volume engine that was produced worldwide in quantities of 700,000 to 1,500,000 units per year, used technology that it had already tested 4 years ago. It is noteworthy that not everyone copied the wet timing belt technology. In addition to PSA, Honda has also picked it up. Others use both dry belts, VW, and theoretically maintenance-free timing chains, Fiat. The location of the belt in an oil bath makes it difficult to replace. It is not enough to have an easily removable plastic cover. Typically a sheet metal or aluminum cover is used, as is the case with the 1.0 EcoBoost, which is screwed on, but more importantly, also glued. It should fit perfectly and be sealed. Careful disassembly, cleaning of all seating surfaces, degreasing and re-gluing make the replacement process much longer and more expensive. This procedure is a source of frequent complaints. If the mechanic is not careful and the sealant is of poor quality, oil leaks can make themselves known very quickly. Therefore, Ford could not afford to mandate belt replacement while the car was still in the hands of early buyers. This would mean that the expected cost of maintenance and therefore the cost of ownership would be too high. So Ford has extended the replacement interval to 240,000 kilometers or 10 years, which is typically the estimated lifespan of a modern car. Of course, there are many cars that survive these miles without fatal wear, and the owners are ready to continue using them. But by this time the belt is usually already delaminate, and its pieces clog the oil intake mesh. Some particles are so small that they pass right through the strainer and destroy the oil pump. Therefore the pump is added to the cost of belt replacement. The belt life may be further reduced if gasoline gets into the oil due to a faulty fuel injection pump. When the belt begins to peel off and pieces are sucked into the oil pump, the pressure in the lubrication system drops and the engine may seize or the turbocharger may fail. These malfunctions occur here more often than belt brakes and valves meeting pistons. If the owner promptly reacts to the slow decay of the oiler or the flashing lubrication indicator when stopping at an intersection, then perhaps nothing will happen. The problem is that unlike, say, PSA's 1.2 PureTech engine, which also used wet belt technology, the 1.0 EcoBoost belt is not visible through the oil filler neck. Therefore, there is nothing left to do but remove the oil pan and see if there are already pieces of the belt on the oil intake grid. If the oil is changed every year and the correct type of oil is used, Ford 5W, 20WSS M2C948B, and the belt is changed no later than 200,000 kilometers, then usually everything will work out without consequences. If the car's mileage is not too high, and the owner knows how to check the coolant level and how to properly respond to any leaks, then it is not necessary to change the pump. Use Ford specification WSSM 2C948B oil with viscosity grade 5W20. Renew it every 10,000 kilometers or every year, whichever comes first. Spark plugs should be changed no later than 60,000 kilometers or 4 years. Timing belt replacement is prescribed after 240,000 kilometers or 10 years, whichever comes first. Since the failure rate increases significantly towards the end of the interval, engine experts recommend reducing the interval to 200,000 kilometers. Replacing timing belts should be combined with replacing the auxiliary power unit drive belt. The water pump is also required to be changed after 240,000 kilometers. If you update the belt earlier, and the pump runs quietly and does not leak, then you can leave it alone. The coolant life is also rated at 10 years, but you will still need to drain it when replacing the belt. It's worth noting that in early engines, the seal around the water passage sometimes allowed coolant to leak. To replace the seal, the timing cover must be removed, which complicates repairs.